Mark, would you like to handle the questions? You want to kind of choose people and cut them off if the statements go too long, that kind of thing.
Okay, if I'm going to do that, I get to ask the first question. All right. One of the things we all do in this trade is bemoan the state of investigative reporting, which, if you look at the history of it in the country, it rises and falls historically, and it would go through periods like Watergate when everyone is and wants to be an investigative reporter, and the media supports us, and then all of a sudden, for one reason or another, it starts to die off. And we're definitely in a die-off now, investigative reporters, which is why Russ and I are both freelancing, basically. And so I'd be interested to know what you think about the state of investigative reporting and its future.
I think it's bad, and one of the sort of encouraging things is that there are a bunch of these entities, more of them now, that are nonprofit investigative reporting outfits, and I'm glad to see them on the scene. And I like the work they do. It's very, very useful. My only problem with them is that they won't do the kind of stories I'm talking about. They also have to consider the foundations that back them, where the money comes from. They need to keep their credibility because it's important to them that they get their stories picked up by the corporate media. So I'm afraid that is not the solution either. The only thing I could think of was to start my own thing, and we really would like to grow Who, What, Why very, very rapidly. We're working on all fronts. We've got a lot of people helping pro bono. If you've got a skill, if you're a graphic designer, or you own a restaurant where we could have an event, or you're a printer, or you are an accountant or anything, we are working with literally scores of people now who are in there helping, others trying to help us raise money. Almost everybody, even if we don't have much ourselves, we can kick something into the bucket. And also, we know people who know people who know people who have resources. And there are a lot of good people in this country who are comfortable or even affluent, and they are helping us function and grow this thing. So what we want to do is we want to train another generation of young investigative reporters. We also want to bring in the Mark Dowies, and Mark is on our advisory council, and ask them if they will mentor these young people and guide them. Let them go out and do a lot of the shoe leather stuff, but benefit from your own knowledge and experience.
Which I do it all the time. And it's to check out this website. It's really, really interesting. It's www.whowhatwhyisoneword.com. And I really encourage you to spend some time with it. You'll learn a lot. So, other questions? Yes, sir.
Now, how about people like Glenn Greenwald? He sometimes seems to be able to defy most conventional ideological perspectives, and is willing to see that. It would seem to me that if you're successful in sort of pushing stories his way, he's phenomenally gifted writer, I think, and it seems to be pretty fearless. I don't know what your experience has been, or if you've ever tried reaching out to Glenn Greenwald, but some of the people who you know, like Peter Dale Scott and David Talbot, that sort of stuff, have reached him with considerable success, and of course he's reached out to them. I would think that because he has a huge following. That's the first thing I read is what Glenn Greenwald.
I don't want to get into individuals because there are a lot of them, but let me just say generically that all of the people you could possibly mention are sent our stories, and none of them cover them. Why that is, I can't tell you, but one of the other problems, I think, is that a lot of the people who may share some perspectives and so on, that unfortunately, like every other business, there are a lot of egos in it, and people are mostly involved with their own franchise. We constantly ask people, why don't we work together? Can we find a way to cooperate, to collaborate? And most of the established people are just not interested. They say, I got my own thing, and that's what I'm going to do. So we're okay with that, and that's why we're going to train a new group.
I think you hit the nail on the head earlier, too, Russ, when you said that, that we produce all this material, but corporate media won't touch it. And I think that the nonprofit investigative groups know that, and they select their material accordingly. You have a question, sir?
With this military, industrial, government, media complex in control, they're never likely to give it up. And we, as even the 99%, won't be able, in a physical way, to take it over. The one hope I have has to do with the end of cheap energy, the collapse of this globalization, so that really we should look forward to these institutions that we so cherish at the national level, so that really our focus all comes to the local level and we rebuild here, rather than trying to transform this global juggernaut. Your thoughts?
I don't know. I mean, I think it's a little too late to just hide out locally. Everything, probably half of the things in your house come from the other end of the world. So I think we're all linked at this point. I agree, local is very, very important, but I think it's also important to recognize that we share a great deal in common with people just like us halfway across the world, and that we're all being oppressed. You see, this is the thing. We're all being oppressed by power centers that keep it all for themselves. It's no different in China. It's no different in Saudi Arabia. It's no different in any of those places. And I think people in other countries understand that much better than we seem to in this country. We are probably the most propagandized people on earth.
Wait.
I think one of the really interesting things you've done recently was the analysis of the New Yorker article on the assassination of bin Laden, and especially the questions you raised about the identification of this person who is now dead. And I wonder if you'd like to, that's been several weeks ago now, do you have new information, new thinking? Do you have doubts of whether it was bin Laden or not?
Yeah, I mean, I actually I'm very agnostic on these things. I'm very careful not to act like I know what happened, because I don't. And really, this is to me, this is the secret of good investigative reporting, is to really genuinely have an open mind and be open to anything. And you got to be okay with the fact that somebody you like or some country you prefer was involved in something bad. You have to be. That's absolutely crucial. This is something I get resistance from people on. They're not happy. This Saudi story, they were not happy with that because they heard stories that another country in the region they believed was behind it. Well, maybe not, but that's not relevant to that particular information that we have. As far as the bin Laden thing goes, all I can tell you is this. This lawsuit that has been filed where they want to see the photos, if the Obama administration was interested in settling this, they could simply say, we're going to designate 2 or 3 well-respected individuals who will be brought in confidence and allowed to look at the photos, including a few people who are experts at identifying people, and we'll let them see the photos. Because their whole point is, we don't want to release them publicly because it'll cause unrest in certain parts of the world. Well, obviously, if they showed it privately to certain truth actors in this thing, we'd settle the whole thing, but that doesn't seem to be an option, and that troubles me. It means that they really just don't want anybody to see those photos.
What about the DNA? They claim they have that.
They did, but we also...
About that, very interesting.
Yeah, they claimed that they did a DNA on him, but according to the DNA experts, that's impossible because it takes a certain number of hours to get a DNA match, and they didn't have the body was already thrown overboard allegedly long before they could have had that window of time.
But they could subsequently have analyzed.
No. Apparently, there's something where, in other words, they announced his identity from DNA prematurely, is what I'm saying. Presumably, but not if you throw him overboard, because now you can't dig him up, right? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I've noticed about my peers in investigative reporting is that the really, really successful reporters like Russ, they have an intuitive sense that a lot of us don't have. And I've had conversations with Russ where he's thrown a theory at me, and I've thought, sounds a little conspiratorial, sounds a little theoretical. They've all proved out, believe me. He has it. And the most successful reporters do have it, and it's a gift. And I envy them. Yes.
Thank you for coming here. I really appreciate your talk, your discussion. I listened to the entire Pat Turkson interview the other morning, Sunday morning. It was great. Moving forward versus looking back, the Obama administration has, essentially said we're not going to look back, we're not going to prosecute, we're not going to look into war crimes. But I feel like it's so important to look back, and I almost want to just stop moving forward. Do you have anything to say on that?
Well, I mean, I think it's certain that the Obama administration didn't feel that this was something that they could do, that it would be counterproductive. And I understand that from their viewpoint, so they're not going to do anything. If anybody's going to do anything about it, it has to be the American people, and you'd have to have people in the streets. All of those countries, whether it was Chile or whatever, it was by popular demand that these things happened.
Bush just got chased out of Canada. I don't know if you read that story, but he was invited to speak at an evangelical college on something or other. And even at the evangelical college in Canada, they put up such a huge stink that he backed off. Rumsfeld has been chased out of even what he thought were secure locations by protesters. And I think that the question was asked, I'm trying to remember who asked it, when is Bush going to be Pinochet? Or when is Rumsfeld going to be Pinochet?
Yeah.
Very good question.
David?
I'm interested in what the information you had in your book. Did that result in any threats to you or any harassment? And was there anything you left out of the book because it'd be too dangerous? And if there was, would you like to reveal that to us now?
Yeah, sure, why not?
He's an assassin.
I get asked, I kid you not, I think every public event I do, somebody asks me the personal danger or threat issue question, and I have to say, these people are way too smart to do that. If you read Family of Secrets, you'll read an exchange I have with a former CIA officer who worked directly with the elder Bush in Zapata offshore, and when I called him and told him what I was doing, there was a long silence at the end of the phone. And this is how you know you're talking to the right people, just a long, dead silence. And then he said, "What did you say your name was again?" And then I told him, and then he said, "And what exactly did you say you're doing again?" And then I repeated that. And then he asked me whether he was authorized to talk to me, which is interesting when you call a person who's purportedly a private citizen who only worked in banking. And so I said, "Well, who would I need to authorize it?" And so he said, "Well, I've got to call whatever he called him, the big guy, the old man or something," which he did. And then he said he told him not to talk to me. So that's the extent of it. Don't talk to him. The last thing that they want to do is draw any attention or even indicate that they even have heard of Family of Secrets or read it. Of course they have. But they're much smarter about it, and they if they're going to do something, they would do it in a much more elegant and nuanced way.
In the time that Russ and I have been working as investigative reporters, in my case almost 40 years, there's only been one American investigative reporter assassinated in the United States, a guy named Dan Bowles. It happened in Arizona early in my career, and what happened after that was that probably 2/3 of the investigative reporters in the country left their desk, went to Arizona, investigated the whole thing, tied the mob, tied the assassins up with the mob in Arizona, wiped it out, implicated Barry Goldwater. They know that when we really focus on something like that, they're devastated. They're going to be devastated by it. So they just don't do it. And that's where I cut my teeth as an investigative reporter in the Dan Bowles investigation. It was very exciting to see all the great reporters there in one place. Anyway, any more questions?
God, every time I read a page. But so it was great. But with the digital age now, do you think that do we need hackers?
Do we need hackers? Oh boy, I don't know. What do you think, Mark?
Well, it depends what you mean by hacker. If you mean people who hack material and turn it over to WikiLeaks, yeah, we do.
WikiLeaks are
Sure we do. Well, no, WikiLeaks receive hacked material. Yeah. And yeah, sure we do.
Just simply because you use a lot of documentation that was old and on paper, you can't change it. But with digital.
Yeah, I mean, this is a whole new world, and I think most of us are still thinking about it and trying to sort it out. I have mixed feelings because, of course, all investigative journalists, all journalists love to receive documents, but at the same time, we don't necessarily publish everything that we receive because we want to think about what is this? Are we sure this is real? Do we know what the intent of the person who wrote it in the first place? You have to remember that one of Bush's friends said to me when I mentioned that his name was in a CIA document, he said, "Hi," he said, "don't you know not to ever believe government documents?" So just releasing huge amounts of documents doesn't necessarily get us closer to the truth, and I think it's important that function of vetting and verifying that serious journalists do is extremely important.
A lot of leaked documents are leaked deliberately to give us a red herring to follow. Yeah. When
I wonder if you did any work in conjunction with architects and engineers for a review of 9/11, the people who were reviewing all the building.
Yeah, we haven't. This is our first story. Of course, we're aware of the work done by them and other groups. That what they have put out. So I don't know exactly what we would necessarily do. I and my colleagues are not experts in the construction of buildings, so unless we could figure out some new sources or some new avenue there, I don't know what we would add. But we are certainly willing to do reporting wherever we see an opportunity, and that the example of that would be our recent piece on Who, What, Why about the Saudi family in Sarasota.
Well, I thought there was a connection with the Bush family, with one of the sons being the project manager.
You know, one of the problems, somebody asked about the digital age, one of the problems is that anybody can post anything, and a lot of the stuff on the internet is false. And a lot of it is it's not necessarily even put up there because people mean it to be false, but because they're not careful and they don't know. And there's just a tremendous amount of stuff. In that case, for example, as far as I know, one of the brothers of George Bush was on the board of a company that provided security services to the World Trade Center some years before the attacks, but they were no longer doing that for a while, a year or two during that period. That's quite different than saying that he was in charge of security. And it's just very important to be precise for credibility and for the public good.
Yeah. Todd. Yeah, go ahead.
Are you going to be relying more on interviews then?
I mean, we rely on everything. We rely on interviews, we rely on documents. We do a lot of old-fashioned stuff. We try to read books. A lot of journalists just don't seem to read books. And for Family of Secrets, I assembled a library of more than 500 books, some of them extremely obscure, even self-published memoirs of people who had worked for George H.W. Bush. And when I called them up, they said, well, how do you know all this? I said, I read it in your book. And they said, oh, I thought only my family would read that. So, we think you have to use any and all methods. It's a lot of work to do good investigative journalism. It takes weeks, months, years sometimes, and we just don't think you should skimp on it, and that's why we're trying to get Who, What, Why properly funded, because it's not like those news organizations where they can knock out 3 stories a day. I mean, we're lucky, some of our people, if they can do 3 stories in a year.
Thank you for taking my second question. I'm glad you mentioned Chile. I was born in Santiago in 1981. I lived there until 1983, so half my family's still there. But anyhow, the Saudis in Florida, the story was just quoted by Bob Graham, and as you know, he's calling for more investigations because of these Saudi connections. And Michael Moore was just on Democracy Now! On the same story, so I'm really glad that at least some attention is going into that. Do you see any, looking back to when Henry Kissinger was appointed to the 9/11 Commission report as director, he had to step down because he was pressured about his business relations to the Saudis. Did you find anything, did you get into the 9/11 Commission reports and connections with your research into Bush?
Well, just very briefly, there are 2 things about those commissions. Number one, they never, ever get to the bottom of anything. And I can take all the commissions in the history of this country, and has any one of them ever resolved anything? Their purpose is not to get to the bottom of things. Their purpose is to settle things in the mind of the public and to allow us to move on. If you remember in the 2000 election, even the New York Times started saying, this is going on too long, just give it to Bush, let's move on. And that's an attitude in the sort of prevailing classes of this country. They don't want chaos, and they don't want to standstill everybody back to work. So I have limited faith in these commissions. There are some good people who are on them, and they try to do what they can. Even the people who are on the 9/11 Commission say they believe they were lied to and that things were withheld from them. So we've got a big problem, and I think those people, to some extent, even some of the people in the power structure, are very sympathetic to the kinds of work that we're trying to do. Anyway, I guess we're going to stop now, and we have some books back there. I hope you will not let your good local bookseller return back to the store with any copies. Get them for holiday gifts if you like, and hopefully if I sign them, they'll be worth at least 1 cent more than they were before. Happy to do it. Thank you so much for coming. Really enjoyed it.